Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Allred from Texas.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here to talk about the historic investments that we've made as part of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. I think Texas has received as much as anybody. I think we were one of the biggest recipients from this legislation. In fact, over the 5 years, we're going to receive $27.84 billion for improvements to our roadways and our bridges. We've already received 9 discretionary IIJA grants valued at over $104 million. In my district alone, in fiscal year 23, we received $12.75 million as in IIJA commitments for highways and bridge projects. It's supporting 1 new project in fiscal year 23, 6 projects in fiscal year 22, and those 6 projects represent $234.8 million for projects for new roads, interchange improvements, rehabilitating existing roadways, right-of-way improvements, traffic signal installation improvements, improving pedestrian lighting. If you're in my district, the IIJA is helping you right now, and it's also creating jobs. And so it was the right thing to do. And Mr. Williams, I was really interested in a couple things in your testimony. Thank you for being here. It's always great working with TxDOT. You highlighted how we are implementing what I think is an impressive plan to build out an electric vehicle charging network in Texas. Thanks in large parts of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, Texas is going to receive $60 million in 2022, the most of any state, to help us meet our goal of expanding access to electric vehicles. Is there anything you want to highlight as lessons learned as you continue to implement this program, especially in regards to working with our state energy officials and the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation?
Good to see you again, Congressman, and thank you for the opportunity to respond to your question. Certainly, anytime we're looking at formula apportionments, because we have the biggest highway system and the most users on that highway system, Texas is typically going to be at the top of the list in terms of the amount of funding distribution that we received. And so that was reflected in the apportionment program for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. In total, we'll see about $400 million coming to Texas for that program. And one of the things that is going to be very important for us to be able to administer that effectively is to have flexibility in where and how those vehicle charging stations are located, to be able to have flexibility also in the contracting methods. We see that it's going to be very important for us to be able to work effectively with the private sector in order for that to be successful. They're going to be the ones that will house those stations and be partners with us in deploying and maintaining those stations. So those flexibility is probably the most important point of emphasis that I would point to make that program successful for us.
I completely agree with you, and I think it's what people want to see. I also want to have local input as much as they can in terms of the placement of this, but to get $400 million for Texas for us to implement this, I think is enormous. As you know, in our state, range anxiety for an electric vehicle is a real thing. If you want to drive across our state, you need to have this network, and if we're going to move in that direction, I think it's really important. You know, I've been also with a lot of our folks from your office about what we're doing to try to reduce and make our roadways safer and to reduce our roadway fatalities. Unfortunately, as you know, we've not had a single day without a roadway fatality since November 7th, 2000. And it's a tragedy, and we are working together to try to address that. I noticed in your testimony you discussed how the IIJA funding could help with that, but how does TxDOT or other state DOTs plan to leverage these safety resources to address making our roadways safer?
Thank you again, Congressman. As you are aware, the Dallas-Fort Worth region has one of the biggest metropolitan planning organizations in the nation, the North Central Texas Council of Governments. One of the initiatives that our commission launched was a task force between TxDOT and our MPOs across the state to look at how we can work together to combine the various funding sources, many coming from the IIJA, many coming from state sources, to really be on the same page in addressing really the critical rise that we've seen in fatalities across the nation and in Texas.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your testimony. I don't have time to ask my other questions, but to the other witnesses, thank you for sharing your expertise. Your testimony was enlightening, and I yield back.